Can you hear us?
Well, if it's going to
Okay.
be, it's up to me to fulfill my dreams and possibilities with dedication and motivation to inspire thousands from all nations. When times are tough and breaks you down, just smile with toughness and rebuild from the ground. During tough times, adversity is a lot. Just remember, time flies, but you are the pilot. Good evening, everybody. What's going on? Welcome to our Monday Motivational Power Talk with Jay Hunter Lee. I am Jay Hunter Lee, the host of this evening, and every Monday night. We do this every Monday at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Uh, each and every Monday. So don't forget to always chime in on Monday. I want to thank those who have already chimed in already. We have another deep conversation. Another deep conversation we're going to talk about, folks. Now, 2 weeks ago, we talked about the truth about slavery and the Civil War. We're going to go even a little deeper into this rabbit hole because we're going to talk about banking wars. We're going to talk about the Federal Reserve Bank. I don't even know why they call it the Federal Reserve Bank because one is not federal and two is not even a bank. So we're going to get into it. Now, here's what before we do, this is what I want to share with a lot of our people. When I say our people, I'm talking about my Black folks. Folks, listen to me. You will never grow if you're not willing and open to listen to information that may challenge your beliefs. You can't grow being biased, okay? Another thing I want to say is take a look at where we are around the world. And I want you to really think about something. As Black folks, we are not prosperous anywhere around the world like we are prosperous in the United States. Keep that in mind. Another thing, you are going to hear some stuff that you've never been taught in school. You would never hear on mainstream media. Okay? You're never going to hear you're not going to get that type of information. Information you're going to get is what not only that they don't know to teach you, you're going to get what they refuse to teach you. All right. So here's what I ask you to do. Have an open mind. And one thing about learning is the same as you do when you moving furniture in your home. You can't put new furniture in your home without first taking the old furniture out. And once you take the old furniture out, you have to clean the house because where that couch and sofa or what sofa we were sitting at, it's a little dirty back there. Because most people don't move the couch and all that stuff to clean up when they do a thorough cleaning. So you got to clean all those intricate areas where your sofa was sitting at. You got to clean. So be open, folks. Be open. If you get some information and it happens to step on your toes, then guess what? Let the toes get stepped on. And those of you who like to challenge information, don't challenge information with your opinions. Don't challenge information with your feelings. Challenge information with some facts. Bring something to the table. Bring some dockets. Bring some documentation. Not just an article that's coming from mainstream media. Bring something to the table that challenges, that make us say, okay, well, that's some good information that you shared. Because if you bring anything that comes from any place that's cheesy, mainstream media and all that, believe me, we have already seen it. And believe me, we've already laughed at it. So bring something to the table that's facts. Bring some historical facts so that we can compare that information. Please do not try to debate. And I tell you guys this about me when I'm just here by myself doing my podcast. If you try to bring mainstream media or some article that you got from the mainstream media to try to debate or challenge me, I will rip you a new one. So please, I will clean your clock. So don't bring that information here because you want to say that's not true. And then you go to Google and try to Google what your biased mind is telling you. That's not how you grow. And that's not research. Research is finding things that challenges your belief system. And you research that. Okay. So we're going to get right into it this evening. First, I want to give a quick shout out to my lady here, Miss Quintina Lee. She said hello, and I got the guys muted, but they'll be speaking just shortly. she said she said, "Bring it, fellas." That's exactly what's getting ready to happen. Um, Folks, I also want to give an announcement. I may or may not do this podcast next Monday because I'm in the process of moving. And with me being in the process of moving, I twisted my knee just the other night. And you guys know I'm in the gym all the time. I didn't go to the gym today. Twisted my knee. Hopefully, I don't think it's the ACL because I wouldn't be on tonight. I'll probably be in the hospital somewhere. But I might have a torn meniscus. That's not as severe. So with that, I'm doing some treatment. I'm taking in some glucosamine that's helping it. I don't have the pain I had 2 days ago, so the pain has gone down significantly, which is a good thing. The swelling it seems to be going down, so it might not be that serious, but I'm still going to probably have it looked at. But I have to move out by the weekend. I'll be moving out as well, so I got a lot of stuff going on. So I might not be on our podcast next Monday. If that's the case, we'll probably either do it later that week or we'll just pick up the next Monday. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and unmute my guys here. You guys remember, Brother William, if you can, try to adjust your camera so the bar won't be cutting you off there.
Is it cutting the head off? It's still cutting it off? I can see myself.
It'll cut the head off if you move close to the camera. It'll cut you off, unless you want to sit back like Big Boss with the gangster lean. So, folks, these guys really don't need any introduction. You guys who was on our live a couple of weeks ago, you've already met them. William Akimba Crowley, and I'm reintroducing Tony right after him. So we're going to do an introduction of them again for those who were not on with us a couple of weeks ago. But I highly recommend you to go back 2 weeks from tonight and revisit the podcast we did that is called What You Didn't Know About the Civil War and Slavery. So please revisit that video so that this video can kind of make a little bit more sense to you, because we're going to pick up from there and we're going right into tonight's topic. Okay. So Brother William Crowley, go ahead and do your introduction, my man. Where can people find you at? Tell them about yourself. And how did you get to knowing all this information that you're going to be sharing with everybody?
Okay. All right. First of all, William Ikemba Crowley. And I've been on this show a couple of times in the past as the credit man. So that's still my area of expertise. That's the way I pay my bills. That's the way I eat. So and I use that same approach in my study and research as I did for the credit repair, which I've been doing that for 20 years. I've been doing the research for probably about 40 plus years. I come from a background of started out, of course, in the Kojic or the Pentecostal churches, and then in 1979, after I graduated from high school, I decided to I went into the military, of course, and then I decided to start doing some studies because family had me kind of predestined to be a preacher, and I said, well, let me do some looking around. You know how people think, that you're being called to be a preacher in our community. It's not like you go to school or anything, you're just being called and then all of a sudden you're in the pulpit, a lot of them. But I said I'd do some research and look around first and see what's going on. And so I started studying a lot of different religions out there, from Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, ancient African religions, etc., including the Holy Bible, which I'd already studied anyway, and found that there was a lot of commonality between them, and that to me, it doesn't matter what religion you are. If you just read that holy book and carry out the principles, there are good guidelines and principles in those holy books. If you choose not to read anything else, you just want to read the holy books. A lot of people out there say they're Christians or they're Muslims or they're Hindus or whatever, and they want to stick with their religious persuasion. I tell them, okay, we'll do that. They just follow your book, because what I find is that most of them don't even follow the laws in their book. They just attach to it from an emotional standpoint. They don't do any study, any research. And if you're going to have any type of doctrine, you yourself must challenge your own doctrine. Okay, you need adamantly challenge your own doctrine. Okay, you don't wait for others to do it yourself. And so that's and then after that, I went into the revolution, I guess, the Black Revolution. Not too much the Black Panther Party. I was introduced to Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, Geronimo Pratt, Johnny Spain, and then family members Bobby Hutton and Fred Hampton. And so they were instrumental in leading me into what you call the African People's Socialist Party, APSP, or the Hoover movement. Some people refer to that as the Hoover movement is guided by the African People's Socialist Party. So I've spent about 20 years in there, I guess, as a or in a national organization. That's what made me to relocate from California to Florida in 1994 with the organization. And I want to mind you that I volunteered my 20 years or so with the movement. I volunteered my time, and we don't get paid. We're out there doing, community grassroots organizing free of charge. Okay. So a lot of times people say, I had a friend of mine that is mentioning about real time. And if he's on this call, I hope he's on the call, because I want to address that question too when we get into the meat of the discussion. And but just after being in the revolution for so long, I once again I challenged myself while I was in there, and I read this book here while I was in there. And now that's I don't know if it's centered or not. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island: A Second Look at the Federal Reserve. And it kind of blew my mind because it criticized the organization's structure that I was in, which was a socialist communist structure, which I upheld pretty strongly, but never looked at it from a critical standpoint. And then when I looked at it from a critical standpoint, I said, wow, this stuff makes sense. And the reason why it made sense was because I was in studying in depth in the revolutionary process in the socialist organization for 20 years or so. And so when I saw this, it was easy for me to make the comparison. Where most people, they'll read a book, but they don't have nothing to compare it to. And then and if they don't like the book, then they just discard it. If they do like the book, then they'll swear by it. And I say, well, don't do either. Study the stuff and then study the alternative information and see where you get from that perspective. But if you lived it, it makes it easier when you look at the critique of it. It makes it easier to absorb it. So now today I'm more conservative leaning, which in the Black community that's considered a racist, which is an oxymoron to me. I don't even know how you I guess I'm a Black racist because I've embraced more of the conservative principles, which most of our community is already conservative. We just don't want to admit it. So I'll leave it there until we get into the discussion.
Thank you very much. And before I go to Brother Tony, can you please hold up the side of that book, because I want them to see how thick that book is.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's about 600 pages, but it's an easy read. I'm gonna share with people how to read it, because a lot of times people don't want to go page by page just yet. So you can read the summaries of end of each chapter. It gives you a summary.
Okay.
And there's about I don't know how many chapters, 20 chapters or whatever, but you can read the summaries and get a great idea of what the books are, and then you could specifically deal whatever chapter you want to after you read the summaries. But I I want to read. I read the whole book, so.
Gotcha. So, folks, one thing you got to realize is you can't have short attention span when you're getting information. A lot of this information could be life changing. It can also be life saving. So just because it's not, now they help you out with that. They probably have an audio book as well. So if you can find an audio book of it, I would say get it and play it in your car. If you drive, play it in your car. Brother, what was the other book you just held up?
Tony, I read that Tony just recently got this, but this is Black Slave Owners.
Yes.
Another good controversial book. I think we should look at the more controversial material, like Jay was saying in his opening, because we've already been fed the information from the mainstream media. We've already allowed ourselves to be indoctrinated with the mainstream media. Why not challenge it now? Let's see some of the alternative information. Don't be immediate to say, racist or white supremacist and all that nonsense. Please, good Lord, I get tired of hearing that crap.
All right. I'm going to bring in Brother Tony Grant. This gentleman has a deep history in his faith. He is strong in his faith. He stands firm on his faith. He also is a researcher, just like myself, just like Brother William here. And he's going to give you his introduction as well. But most of you guys have been on my podcast last few weeks. You already know who he is. But I'm going to turn it back over to him again so he can introduce himself to you guys. So, Brother Tony Grant, it's your turn to burn. It's your time to shine.
What's up? What's up? What's up? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
All right, fellas. So again, my name is Tony LeGrant. Like Will, I met Will back in 1997. Moved to Florida in 95, summer of I think 95, for the Department of Corrections from Maryland. And that's how I ended up down here. While I was up in Maryland and DC, I belonged to an organization, Nuwaubian, United Nuwaubian Nation of Moors. And before that, it was the Hebrew Israelites. And then before that, it was Ansar Allah Doctrine. So a lot of that, like Will said, I volunteered my time. Once I became part of the organization, I volunteered my time. I didn't get paid, but I was interested in selling books. And this organization was led by a guy named, a lot of you guys might know him. His name was Malachi Z. York. And I followed Malachi Z. York intensely. I mean, I followed him intensely and would debate with anybody, anywhere. Even had some of the guys come over to my house and debated with my mom and family members and the whole nine. So I was real intense on it. But I was just always that guy. Even coming up, I was just always that kid that, Church of God background. Mom always took me to church, and I always had a lot of questions. Even going into the military, I just had a lot of questions about who, what, when, why, and how. And it bothered me. I don't know about a lot. Some people can just let it be. It just bothered my spirit. And to the point where I actually found, Nation of Islam. Before Nation of Islam, I found Ben Ami and Yahweh Ben Yahweh, and then from there, it just kept rolling until I found, like I said, Malachi's York and the Nuwaubian Nation. And then from there, it just grew and blossomed from there, So now it's become more of a, I guess, how you say, philosophical type of free thinker, always searching for truth. And yeah, as you guys say, just always challenging myself. And since 2013, I found out and discovered a lot of things that, just blew me away. But going back to Will and I mean, I met him in 1997 at Crown Mitsubishi. And we just, we had a good rapport, and then it just grew and blossomed from there. So I'm always in the books, and I'm always challenging, and critically thinking about different things. I'm more of a person that's more in tune with the, the spiritual side of things and the esoteric stuff. I wanna the esoteric and try to be in tune with nature. And try to intermingle what is being in tune with nature with what is going on around me. And then try to, mesh the two together to make some type of common sense of it. So this is where I am today with it, And I guess I'll just leave it at that part until we further go into the conversations.
Really, really appreciate it. Guys, well, before I ask you two a question, I forgot to give everybody my drink for the evening. Is sparkling lemonade. Listen, guys, you can get this from Aldi's. It's really good. It comes in like a little champagne looking bottle. It's really good. Is natural, of course. So don't sleep on Aldi's, folks. Get up in Aldi's and get you some of that organic stuff up in here. A lot of it, they got some corn chips in it that's non-GMO. There you go. There you go, William. Get on in there and get some of that good stuff that's going to be good for your body, people. Now, Brother Tony and Brother William, I do have a question for you guys because both of you have mentioned the Nation of Islam. I too was in the Nation of Islam, but I was at my status was what they call processing. So were you guys processing or did you guys get your X?
No, I was definitely processing.
You out
Tony, you was processed, right, Tony?
I was processing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Y'all
Tony took us.
process.
Yeah. Because the Nuwaubians are like a step up or a step to the side, or what for the nation, Tone?
I would think it was like 1 degree higher. We took it 1 degree higher, but throughout my time with the nation, the Nuwaubian nation, I came to realize that it was not as disciplined as, say, the Nuwaubian nation. Nation of Islam. It was not as disciplined. There was discipline there, but not as disciplined. Because, and just like in the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad ended up being somebody who was thought to be worshipped versus, just following his message. And so that's what ended up happening with Malachi Z. York. You had a lot of people that just thought that he was, he couldn't do no wrong.
They started worshiping the wrong person.
Yeah. And so, but he did say, something that stuck with me is another thing he said was that, Black people would be the ones who would end them. And I guess that's sort of kind of true. His own organization.
Gotcha.
In what? People in what?
Him.
Oh, in him. Okay, gotcha.
And what he did. And so I think, but just like with Elijah Muhammad, I think Malachi took it a step further. And there's a bunch of controversy out there that says that he didn't do it. And there's a lot of people said he did or didn't. But I tend to believe, that he did do it when it came to child molestation or child trafficking, or anything like that. I tend to believe it. There's a lot of evidence that points towards it. And I look at the certain situations when they asked him to, put in his plea, he answered guilty. A lot of people say, hey, he was under the influence. He was deprived of sleep deprivation. And he only said what he said because his wives were in jail as well. But I think that if it were me and if I knew I was innocent, then that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say I'm innocent.
Exactly.
But he said he was guilty.
Yeah. Don't say you're guilty to something if you're innocent.
Right. So.
Yeah. Especially of
but
that
besides
magnitude.
that, there were other things that just kind of led me to believe that this man, he took it to a whole nother level.
Gotcha.
Now the closest I came, but Jay, the closest I came was in a 1980.
Adjust the screen a little bit, William.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got me.
Is that the best? If you can adjust your camera, just move it.
I don't know.
There you go.
No.
Unless you guys want me to take this bar down, I can take that bar down if you want. It may make it easier for you.
Oh yeah. Cause I see what you're saying. The bar up there, Monday Night Motivational.
Yeah, I can take that down.
Okay, I want to ruin your advertising though.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
All right.
Because what I can do, let me see.
I was going to show my other books. I had it propped up on my books, but
is that better?
Oh yeah, is it? I don't know. You can see me better than I can.
And I just popped my logo up right there. See that?
Okay, yeah. I see you took it off.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, I'm back. Is it
okay?
Cool.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
Yeah. So mine, my encounter with the nation was I was headed there, going to make a choice either between the Nation of Islam and the Hulu movement. We did a event with Khalid Muhammad in San Francisco in 1988, 88 or 89, I think it was. And so, which I was really impressed with Khalid Muhammad. He taught me a lot about what you call the Jewish question in the Black community, and of course the Nation of Islam. So I don't really have any critique of the organizations, because that was my stepping stone, my foundation, and then that's what enabled me to get where I'm at today, because they did have a lot of good things. And these are our elders. These people have been through a lot more than we have, and their interpretation of it is somewhat different, And so I think it's time for us to take a look at that conservative element that has been ridiculed in our community, and look at that from the standpoint that we looked at the liberal leftist ideology that we all embraced at one time. And to me, the conservative viewpoints, of course, it needs to be tweaked as well. But I see much more of a future of us embracing the conservative ideology over this leftist ideology. But the most important thing I learned from the Nation was, the Jewish question, especially with the Nation of Islam book, volume 1 and 2 of The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. Very controversial book, but it does make a lot of sense.
I remember Dr. Khalid Muhammad. I was with him in DC once, and he said he called them Jewish because they wish they were Jews. He was. And you talk about somebody's controversial, man.
That guy like Malcolm.
Yeah, he didn't play. But I want to get into where we left off. We were talking about the Civil War and slavery, and we were kind of moving forward into the banking system. A lot of people already know about the Rothschilds. The famous quote, "I care not who runs the country," or something like that. I just give me just give me control of money supply.
Give me the control.
That was Mayor Amschel Rothschild, and that was about the year 1790 when he made that quote.
And he said, "Give me control of a nation's economy, and I care not who writes its laws."
Right.
But now remember, he wasn't the first to do that. There was others that done it, just that the Rothschilds did perfect it. Okay. There were others that did it before them, just that they perfected it and stayed with it, of course.
Right. So with the research, what is the Federal Reserve Bank, and what is their function? Are we ready to talk about that yet, or do we have what they call a prerequisite of stating what the Federal Reserve actually is?
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, I mentioned earlier, this is the book there's a lot of different books out there, but this is the profound one because it's The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. It's a second look at the Federal Reserve. 600-page book, very intense, and it takes you from the American Revolution forward, but it goes into England in the 1600s, all the way back to the 1300s, actually. So it gives you a good in-depth monetary history of the Western world. Now, it doesn't deal with, of course, ancient Africa, and in order to deal with that monetary aspect, you probably should take a look at Cheikh Anta Diop. That's Cheikh Anta Diop, the last name is Diop, and that is a civilization of barbarism, which we spoke about that last week to some extent. We were talking about more of the slavery question then, but the monetary element is in there too. So what I'd like to say though, Tony, did you want to say anything on that, Tone, or?
Well, I just want to say, when you mentioned about the slavery and the monetary is in there too, I think the monetary is the biggest part of it. And I think you always have to follow the money. So when we talked a couple of weeks ago about, slavery and the Civil War, these were times in the 1800s, Civil War in the 1860s and the slave ownership and when blacks owned slaves, this was in the early 1800s, all the way up until about the Civil War. So, but when you want to ask yourself, and this is one of the things that I always do to kind of challenge myself. So we always talk about, okay, so where when we talk about blacks owning slaves, what was happening on the financial side. So you hear all this talk about, okay, well, we own slaves too, but then what was happening on the financial side as well? What were the bankers doing? What was happening with the Constitution? Why did Lincoln do what he did? As far as the Emancipation Proclamation, because a lot of that stuff, when you start looking at the financial part of it, it doesn't really kind of add up to what they were telling you in school. You follow? So what they were telling you in school is kind of way off from when you start doing revisionist type of due diligence, then you start to see things in a better, better understanding, in a better light. So go ahead, Will, finish what you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to the victor go the spoils. Let me say that first of all. To the victor goes the spoils. In other words, history has been written by the victors, okay, and the losers, their information has been suppressed. Right. So what my motivation is, I want to go back and see what the losers' version of that story is, okay, and that information is usually banned material,
censored,
burned, censored, yeah, etc. Because, fact and check. I'm saying, right. So what'd you say?
Fact check.
Yeah, fact check. Don't even give me the fact check crap. But so to the victor go the spoils, and I to the victor go the spoils. But the victors, if you legitimately won something, then you should be open to any type of discussion, any type of criticism, to make yourself better. Criticism, constructive criticism, only can make you better. So if I win something, I don't want to just automatically just totally discard the opposing party or suppress their history. I mean, their history is important too. They had a history before our interaction ever happened. So what I want to do is go study it. Now, and saying to the victor go to spoils, I want to go back to the religious question as well, because these, what I call these religious hypocrites, is that they don't know anything about their holy books. I mean, I'm talking about Christians, I'm talking about Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, all like that. All they dwell with is this emotional attachment, right? But I say that, okay, the emotional attachment is good, but there is an element of everyday life that's in there as well. Like Hosea 4:6 in the Bible. That's a real life question. My people are destroyed by the lack of knowledge. Now I'm paraphrasing, just taking out a portion of that. It's a little bit longer than that, but the essential part of that verse is, which is in Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed by the lack of knowledge. And then I forget where it's found, the truth, seek ye the truth, and the truth shall set you free. I forget what verse that in. Tony, you might want to check that out. Jay, you might want to check that out. And then in James, it talks about faith without works is dead. And right. And then in Romans, the 13th chapter, it talks about the Christian relationship to the government. And essentially what it's saying is that the Christian has a responsibility, such as the Second Amendment, to abide by a government that is obedient to God's laws. If that government isn't obedient to God's laws, then it's your responsibility not to work alongside that government. Now, the Second Amendment, me and Tony was having a discussion earlier this week. The Second Amendment by James Madison, it says, okay, and I'll paraphrase, but I know it said this: we have to have a well-armed militia that will overthrow a tyrannical government. That's the primary motivation of the Second Amendment. All the other discussions that we have is because it's being led by these gun rights enthusiasts that don't want you to have guns, and they're saying all kind of garbage about mass murders and things like that. This government's killed hundreds of millions of people in wars. Nobody was talking about banning guns at that time. But when you get one lone nut out here that's more than likely under the influence of some type of drugs anyway, that was probably given to him through a MK Ultra program or a CIA ops program, they were giving them drugs anyway, and they go shoot up the place. Well, now I'm the only one on the screen. Oh, everybody still there?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So,
you were just on the road. That's all. I just wanted to get a good look at
you. You messed me up on the road. But anyway, so So, but if you just take your Bible or take the Constitution, the Bible and the Constitution, if you don't want to study all this, all this extensive study and research we've done, then look at your Bible and look at the day-to-day activities, what you're supposed to be doing as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Hindu, as Buddhist, whatever you want to call it, consider yourself. Follow those laws, and that would significantly help us so-called freedom fighters in doing what we need to do to expose the contradictions in the system. I don't have to be a Christian like you. I don't have to be a Hindu like you. I don't have to be a Buddhist like you. My motivation is studying the ancient African religions, from whence I think most of your current day religions come from. If you look at the Book of the Dead out of ancient Egypt, which was written 3,000 to 4,000 years before any of the monotheistic religions came into existence. Monotheism started in ancient Africa. The matriarchy started in ancient Africa. The patriarchy started in ancient Africa. If you look at the Book of the Dead, written by E.A. Wallace Budge, and that's called the Book of Coming Forth from Night to Day. So I just wanted to say that before we got into this. Now, the Constitution, I did mention that. The Constitution says, even now the Bible speaks out against usury as well. So when we get into, we're talking about money, usury. Michael Hoffman wrote a book called Usury in Christendom. Michael Hoffman, Usury in Christendom. I would implore every religious-minded person out there that's participating in usury, which all of you are, to read that book and understand the contradictions that you are participating in that you need to overturn. Okay, we don't need to be participating in usury. But Michael Hoffman breaks it down well in that book. Article 1, Section 810 of the United States Constitution says, Congress shall coin money and regulate the value thereof. Let me just go ahead and let me just read it to everybody. That is hold on. Sorry about that. I should have had that keyed up already.
What is that article again?
Article 1, Section 8 and 10 of the Constitution. And that talks about Congress have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. That's what it meant. Just like when I was talking about the Second Amendment.
Hey, Will, when you get on the page, let us know.
That'll be chapter 15, and that'll be 310 or 309. In the Constitution, if you're looking at the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 and 10 of the Constitution. But if you're looking at the creature from Jekyll Island, 8 and 10. If you're looking at the creature from Jekyll Island, it's on page 309. It's at chapter 15, the Lost Treasure Map. That's the title. And it says, Congress shall have the power to borrow money, to coin money, regulate the value thereof. And then there's more to it. And then I go on down to the bottom part of it. Says, no state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, or make anything but gold and silver coin a tender and payment of debts. Okay, I'll just read that last part again. No state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, or make anything but gold and silver coin a tender and payment of debts. The delegates were precise in the use of these words. Congress was given the power to coin money, not to print it. They were adamant about that. And the reason why they were adamant about it was because what happened in Europe and what's happened with paper currencies throughout time, throughout the history of the world. Anytime you have a paper currency and you go off of what you call the gold standard, silver standard, because the silver standard preceded the gold standard because silver was more readily available. Right. And I'm going to throw out a lot of books here, so because I always like people to go and read for themselves. The Web of Debt by Ellen Brown. The Web of Debt by Ellen Brown. That would probably be the next best book if you want to understand the monetary history of the world, as opposed to the creature from Jekyll Island. And that talked about the silver standard preceding the gold standard because the gold wasn't as readily available as silver. Okay. But
did you recall the year? Do you recall the year of the silver standard? The year of the silver standard.
Oh, this stuff goes all the way back to the time of Egypt. Egypt and before.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah. we're still in the are they coming out of the Stone Age?
Who? The Egyptians?
During that era, were they like coming out of the Stone Age?
Who was coming out Stone Age? I'm not hearing you.
Society, with society coming out of the Stone Age in that era, during that era you just spoke of.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, I guess you could say that. Let me just say more on that first of all, because the first medium of exchange, or the first exchange of money, was bartering. Okay, and that's the most sound and safest for us as group of people. Even in America to this very day, bartering is probably the most effective and safest. Because when you get into exchanging their money, dealing in their monetary system, there are rules and regulations that they create to unbalance the playing field. Okay, as a when we barter means I have something of that you think is valuable, you have something that I think is valuable.
That's
The
right.
value is placed on between us two, and the exchange is made. There's no intervention, there's no taxation, there's no intervention in fees or anything from a third party that has nothing to do with that transaction. Bartering has been around since the beginning of time, and that's what I promote. I'm an advocate of the bartering system. Even in my business, I'll offer bartering as a means of exchange. As
You know
opposed
what's
to
funny?
Go ahead.
Funny thing is, in my book, Change Your Mind, Change Your Life, the first chapter in my book, I talked about the ages. I started from the Stone Age, and I talked about bartering in that age.
Oh,
And it's
okay.
funny. It's funny that you just mentioned that. That's why I asked you what era, which age, because it sounded familiar to what I wrote in my book,
Oh,
and
okay.
that was based off of my medium abilities. I said it makes sense that bartering had taken place back in the Stone Age. And
Mhm.
now that I'm more advanced in knowing that, what I found, the bartering took place what is called Silk Road. You guys familiar with the Silk Road?
Oh, yeah, that's China.
It's coming out of China, that
Mhm.
right. And I did some history and found that the Arabs had took the Silk Road and perfected it. And to this day, that's why, like, to this day, they perfected that trade, that Silk Road movement. Those folks got trillions of dollars. People saying billions, but I know for sure, they have trillions of dollars with how they operate. They call our money system here in the United States, what is that? Wall Street. They call that welfare
Yeah, it is more.
compared to wow. So
Yeah, it
I'm
is.
glad you mentioned that, because people really need to know what's going on. And I remember Robert Kiyosaki mentioned the Federal Reserve as well.
Well, he
How
did that
it
in.
connects to the U.S. Mint. The IRS is basically the collection agency for the Federal
Yeah.
Reserve.
And now, anytime I give a reference, I always try to tell people where 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 you get the reference
Where
from.
you get yeah,
In Robert Kiyosaki's book, that's The Conspiracy of the Rich.
conspiracy of the rich. Yep.
Yeah, he wrote that, and he had this book in the background. If you look on the title of that book, he had the creature from Jekyll Island sitting in the background. That's on the cover of that book, The Conspiracy of the Rich, and that's where he goes into it. So he's very familiar with the creature from Jekyll Island. And
Right.
I've got that book too. I've read that book too.
Yeah, I
Agreed.
got
Bartering
I
is
have that
very
book.
valuable. Mm-hmm. Tony, I know you want to get in, probably say something, but let me just say something else too, because when we're sharing this information, folks, we do want to hear interaction from people. So if people got questions or whatever, be sure to type it in the chat, and Jay can get those questions to myself and Tony and or Jay, because I like to deal with stuff that the people are interested in, as we're doing our particular presentation. They may not be interested in something I'm particularly saying right now. They may want to add, say something else or add a question or whatever in that. All right, Tony, I'm on the Constitution right now, dealing with Article 1, Section 8 and 10, and we'll take it forward from there. So you want to say something else?
No, I mean, yeah, just going back to Article 1, Section 8 through 10, or in 10, it says that Congress shall have the what was the word used there
The power
specifically? The power to coin money,
and
right?
regulate the
So,
value thereof.
right. So I think one of the most other important parts that we need to add into the mix is the fact that when they gave way to, say, the first bank of America, that was unconstitutional. That was an unconstitutional thing, because the forefathers had put specifically, like you had just read in the Creature from Jekyll Island, that they had the obligation to do it. It didn't say anything about delegating the power. So when they delegated the power to, say, the Rothschilds and the bankers, they, that was an unconstitutional thing that they did. So even with the Federal Reserve, going with the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, they delegated their powers, and that was unconstitutional. You can't do that. That's why so many people are saying that, hey, it's unconstitutional. The Federal Reserve was, and even the IRS.
Yeah, which came as a result of the Federal Reserve. It's part of the Communist Manifesto to create a graduated income tax and the central bank. That's
Right.
one of the primary ways to control the mass of the people.
Mhm.
Now,
You know what's funny? Right before you go on real quick, William.
Yeah.
I know several millionaires, and one guy wanted to show me something. He said, "Jay, watch this." He went and called his bank and asked them, tell them he want to withdraw $1 million in cash. You know what they said to him?
go.
We
I
don't
can't
we
do
don't
it.
have we don't have it here. We have to call the Federal Reserve.
And and I'm glad you said that, because people should not be. Don't ever listen to what the bank. Well, listen to what the banks say and then go and verify it. Like what did Reagan say? Trust but verify. So,
Right.
but the FDIC also. The FDIC doesn't insure your money. Okay, that's the impression that we've been given, is that the FDIC insures our money. That's a long chapter in this book, and I'm not going to go into it. But just remember that who insures your money is your brothers and sisters out there, the same people that have money in the bank, the same people that are paying taxes. That's what is your insurance. So if the people decide not to pay that, then you're in trouble, because the banks are sure not going to pay it. The FDIC is there to bail out the big banks when they create problems, and that's all it's for. Don't ever think that it's for you. So when that guy went to get his money, that $1 million in the banks participate in what you call fractional reserve banking, FRB, fractional reserve banking. It's illegal for me and you to do it, but it's okay for them. What the banks do is every deposit that comes in, that means they can lend out 10 times the amount or more of your money. So
I thought it was
or
9.
more.
So it is 10.
Oh yes, 10 times or more.
Okay.
So it's probably up to 15 times now, because that was back then.
Yeah, when I knew it was 9.
Yeah.
Okay.
When it started, what you gonna say something, Tom?
No. I was just
No, he was
agreeing
giving
with
a number.
saying 10.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's
Okay.
10 times more. So the banks are there. That is our biggest enemy, and that is the core problem of pretty much any major conflict that has happened since the beginning of time. It's been primarily about the banks. When the banks come into picture, money becomes what I call unsound. Okay, unsound. Bartering is the best way. If you're going to use the banks, use them in a limited perspective, okay? Because they're there to make money off of you. You're never going to make money off of them. Well, I don't want to say never, because have been some creative people, but most of those creative people are in jail now because they tried to bypass, or they're dead because they tried to bypass the Federal Reserve banking system or the central banks. Now, this Federal Reserve that Tony just talked about in 1913, that was the fourth central bank in this country, okay? But the people, the founding forefathers, when they came to the Constitutional Convention, they were adamant about this question of money. And the reason why they were adamant is because they know historically what paper money has done since the beginning of time. Paper money can be manipulated. It can be inflated, devalued, or anything at the push button of the person that's in control. But you can't do that with gold and silver, precious metals, primarily. You can't do that. It's more difficult to do it. That's why the bankers want a paper money system, because they're in control. In a gold standard system, then they don't have the control that they have in a paper money system. Look through it historically. This book here goes into all the paper money systems, excluding Egypt, because they always like to exclude Egypt because they don't really we didn't document our stuff as well as we should have. But on those pyramid walls, it's not only the biblical text that's on those pyramid walls, there's everyday life on those pyramid walls. And it talks about the banking system and everything. And we had crashes in ancient Egypt and Ethiopia and Nubia, as well as we had them in current day Persia, Rome, Greece, on and forward. Let me stop there, Tone. You can chime in. Then I need to get a swig of water here.
Nah, I think Jay Lee, if you have there was a question. I think Kiki, she was saying that if the banks, I don't know if she said if the bank goes bankrupt, then the currency is gone. I'll say this: when it comes to your currency is gone, I mean, now Will had alluded to the FDIC with, I think, what is it, Will, like $250,000?
Yes, now it's 250.
Yeah, now it's 250,000. But with that being said, the Federal Reserve, and that's what they're there for, is to continue to print money, just endless money, just continue to print money. But they've already been bankrupt, since 1933. I forgot, it was HR. What was it? Where they had already declared that they was bankruptcy.
HR 192.
Yeah, HR 192.
House resolution.
They declared bankruptcy. Yeah, House resolution, which is HR 192. They declared bankruptcy. And so from that, there's never been a time since that point that there's been real money that has been in circulation, real money. So what they've been using is bills, and if you look on the back of your paper bill, it says this is legal tender for all debts, private and public, but it holds no value. You can't take that piece of paper to the bank and get any type of gold or silver for it in this present day. You can't do it. This country is bankrupt. We've been bankrupt for a long time. And I think that's the thing that people need to realize as well.
And so the founding fathers were adamant. They were adamant about that. That's why they dealt with that in the Second Amendment. Those were the two of the primary, important clauses. I mean, the whole Constitution is important, but those were the two very important clauses: with the Second Amendment and the money issue. Okay, and because they understood what happened specifically in Europe with the central banks in Europe, which was controlled, which in this the 11th chapter of this book goes into what you call the Rothschild formula. Now, most people they'll talk about all the Rockefellers, the J.P. Morgans, Kuhn Loeb. They'll deal with everybody except for the Rothschilds. And the Rothschilds reigned supreme over the banking since probably about the 1600s in this country. And they the ones that manipulated Waterloo. And that was the war in England against the French, when they thought that when they said that the English would lose at Waterloo, because they thought that I forget the general's name, wouldn't be able to beat Napoleon at Waterloo, and they did. But the Rothschilds knew it ahead of time, and they called it. But that's in here too. I don't want to go into detail on that, because what we want to do is show the connection between this whole question of this so-called slavery that we're all up in arms about, that we talked about on the last show. But me and Tone want to show today on how the money aspects need to be considered, because the Civil War was not about slavery, okay? And most of the wars that we've had is not about the U.S. debt clock. Glad you put that up. You want to say something on that, Jay?
No, I remember Tony was kind of alluded to it earlier, so I just thought I would pull that up.
Oh, okay. So
he touched it, but he didn't touch it. So, but it kind of brought to my attention that go ahead and pull it up, because maybe it's something he wanted to say off of it.
Tone, did you want to say something on that?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So it can bore you with all the books that we're throwing out and the theories that they're coming up with. But most of these theories are sound economic theories. And most of us that are listening aren't economists, okay? And most of us haven't studied monetary history, but yet and still would be the first to discard this information and label it as this conspiracy theory. And that's something that the ruling class came up with for the masses of us ignorant folks, so we can jump onto that and discard anything that comes to us of any relevance that they don't want us to look at. So they immediately got us labeling it as conspiracy theory as well. I tell people if anything comes to me that's in conspiracy theory format, I'm definitely looking at it. Okay. And I would strongly suggest that you look at it too, because that's something that's been planted to keep those in power with running their money scheme afloat. And we've got to disallow that. So anything with a conspiratorial nature attached to it, we should definitely examine it. Now, as we said, the Civil War was about money. The Revolutionary War was about money. The War of 1812 was about money. All of the major conflicts since probably around the 1700s have been about the banks.
You've got the Revolutionary War. That was about money.
Oh yeah, the American Revolution, huh?
Mm-hmm.
But these people, I used to look at them and say, "Oh, these guys are hypocrites," because they were slaveholders and they still had slaves. And they went to fight against England, and they fought for their freedom, but they didn't fight for our freedom. In reality, that's not true either. Okay, we need to really go and take a look at that, because they did want to get rid of slavery. Slavery was demoralizing for everybody. Okay, and if I got slaves, and I got to take care of them, I got to feed them, I got to clothe them, I got to provide health care, which that's what was happening primarily in the South. That's not talked about. And if you don't believe me, let's.
Uh-oh, did he touch a button by mistake?
Should be. Yeah, I think he muted on accident.
Uh-oh, he cut himself out. Yeah. So, but just in what he was saying is, I think that when we look at slavery and what was happening at the time in the Civil War versus slavery and what they were calling, what he was saying was slavery, I think it was a way of life in the South so much. And up north, they coined the phrase slavery, and they used that. I think that was one of the things that they used to kind of drive a wedge. And see that when you start looking at the history of it, you'll see that how the bankers, and it's funny how it happens, because France and say I think England, I think France and England, they and Britain, they kind of wanted to divide up the country. When we talk about America, United States, they kind of wanted to divide it up. France, they had already been talking about this in 1857. You know what I'm saying? So France wanted Mexico. They wanted to expand their horizons in Mexico. And then from that point, England, they wanted to take over the South. And then you had Britain that had their troops and everybody on the border of Canada. So I think what they used was they used, and just in my opinion, I think what they used was this slavery, this term slavery, to say, hey, listen, we don't want slavery. And they used that to drive a wedge between, driving America apart. Because it was looked upon, from what I've been reading, it wasn't really called slavery. It was just indentured servants, or maybe that was just a way of life. That's just what it was, because we went over 2 weeks ago how the blacks, even the blacks, were buying slaves, were buying black slaves, and they had slaves, they had land. In the same time frame that, say, Andrew Jackson, the first president who outed the banksters, he had slaves. But then when you look at history and what they teach in school, they'll tell you that, oh, well, Andrew Jackson was a racist. Well, how, if you critically think about it, how could Andrew Jackson be a slave? How could Andrew Jackson be a slave owner and a racist when you had the first legal slave owner by the name of Anthony Johnson, who was a slave owner? So I think to get to what Will was saying, I think they use that as a wedge to further drive the United States of America apart. With, okay, well, it was slavery up north, and then down south it was more of a, that was just a way of life. And then when you look at Lincoln, he comes with the Emancipation Proclamation deal, and saying that, well, there will be, we want to abolish slavery in all of the Confederate states. Well, why didn't it mention anything about the the northern states? It just mentioned the Confederate states because maybe perhaps down south, that was the way of life. That was the way of doing business. Whereas up north, that was not how they did it. And perhaps maybe the government had more control over the situation as far as, what slavery was and was not. But I'll let you go ahead and finish it, Will.
Oh, yeah. I was going to actually
Yeah.
show the
Hey,
book.
Tony,
Go ahead.
Tony, center your camera.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Can you
See,
hear me
Will,
okay?
you
Testing?
left and then came back in. Now you disrupted everything.
I know. I
I'm
don't know
putting
what
this
I did.
squarely on your shoulders, bro.
Yeah, I hit thing. But yeah, so this question of slavery, like just to recap, okay, every race has been enslaved, and most of them have been enslaved much longer than we were. Okay, we've been enslaved in America for no more than 300 years. Some people have expanded up to 500 years. But prior to our enslavement here, the Africans were in Spain and enslaved them for 700 years, from 700 to 1400. Prior to that, the Egyptians went all throughout Europe. Okay, but it was a way of life for us in Africa, and what even called slavery. I think it's prisoners of war. And I want to let me give a shout out to a gentleman that can go into more detail on this, and that's Shaka Almos. And he's on Instagram, he's on Sinetta's show, and it's almost a forbidden or taboo subject to talk about black folks enslaving others. But Shaka Almos, and he's not some just off the wall historian. This guy studied under Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and a lot of the major ones and knew them personally. And he came up with this synopsis, and it does make a lot of sense. I had saw it in Sheikh Anta Diop's book, and it resonated with me, but I didn't go as far as he did. But Shaka Almos is SHAKKA tone, and then
Yeah.
Almos
A
AHMOSE.
yeah.
And Kiki, if you have that information in your documents, whatever, put his information up on the chat if you can, so people can see that. Because Kiki's putting up in
SHAKA.
SHAK Shaka SHAKA and then AHMOSE. AHMOSE. Check him out, and he does a course on it. Okay. And he showed, listen, we've enslaved them a lot longer than they've enslaved us. Okay, if you want to even use the word slavery, because he even goes to the point where it's prisoners of war. Okay, that's what essentially was, and it was a way of life for us in Africa, well before when the Europeans were still, for lack of, there it is, a shock
Yes.
almost.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
no,
it.
it's you that take that you out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And matter of fact, me and Tony was anxious to get on Sinetta TV because Shaka almost was going to debate Garfield and Jabari on that subject, but then they had some internal contradictions that prevented that from happening. But that was a very anxiously awaited subject that we wanted to hear from a person that had a level of expertise much higher than us when it comes to that question. So please take a look at him and look at some of his shows, and you can get a better idea of slavery. And then we can shut the hell up and quit using that, because we use it right now as a strategy to play victim and
And stay
to
in
try to get
power.
reparations. Huh?
And stay in power.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have money. We just don't use our money right. That's what we need to really say. Blueprint for Black Power by who's the name? The Blueprint for Black Power. Who wrote
Claude
that book?
Anderson, you talking about?
Amos.
Oh, okay.
Amos. Somebody will get it in the chat. Blueprint for Black Power by Amos. I forget his name, but he talks about the strategies of what we need to incorporate in keeping our money amongst ourselves, just like everybody else does. Okay, and create a federal bank if we had the Federal Reserve Bank.
Yeah.
Is
He's the guy with the
guy?
ponytail.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Don't call the ponytail to him. No, that's a instrument of, or a symbol of knowledge, actually, for the more well versed theoreticians and teachers in our culture. So anyway, so didn't want to go off on that tangent, but I do want to make sure that that's a subject that it really frustrates me, is that we spend so much time playing victim that we can't deal with the contradictions that we can. 80% of our contradictions are internal. The 20% that's external, we've considered that the elephant in the room, and we focus more on that than trying to change our own selves and make our own selves better. That's what we really need to do. And so we're trying to give this type of information here to say, okay, theoretically and scientifically, not theoretically, but scientifically, here's how we can cut through all this nonsense. Okay. The Civil War was not about slavery. Lincoln did not care nothing about messing with the institution of slavery. He was part of the ACS, the American Colonization Society, and his Gene Till.
Genie Tail. Talking about Amos.
Gene Till. Okay. Okay. So
that's his rites of passage, man.
Yeah. Right. So
Amos Wilson.
Amos Wilson. That's it. Good deal.
Yep.
Amos Wilson. That's a blueprint for Black Power, and that book is about 800 pages. I would say it's a thick book. Okay. And I love reading. I've read the majority of it. I haven't read the whole 800, but I've read probably about 75-80% of the book. I got what I needed out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, where's that now? We were talking about
getting
slavery,
off but we have to get away from playing victim.
Right. And scientifically, we could get away from that. That's how me and Tony look. Listen. Most people on this call probably haven't been in organizations, haven't volunteered their time for over 20, 30 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever the case may be. You haven't volunteered your time, and yet and still you want to criticize us for coming up with these type of observations. But what we're doing is I feel responsible, because I've taught a lot of people and brought a lot of people into various organizations that taught that victimized position. And it's really damaging. So that's why I'm so adamant about coming back and trying to address these issues and actually be self-critical and apologize to those who I've misled and say, listen, here's some alternative information that probably sounds a little bit more concrete than what I introduced to you in the past. And by no means are we saying we at the ultimate truth. We're just saying, listen, we've got some alternative information that does sound more convincing, and it puts the burden of change upon us. We've got to make the change, and you can't make change by sitting up blaming everybody else for what you're doing. 80% you, 20% them, then change the 80% that you can change, and then we can deal with the 20% that they do.
So Jay, what was something that you wanted to ask about the Federal Reserve? Because now I think what we were talking about, it's a perfect segue into the actual Federal Reserve System, what it is.
Yeah, I want to go into what it is, the connections. Who is connected? Is it connected to the IMF, the World Bank, or I know there's a connection with the U.S. Mint.
Okay.
The banks is what they call the watchdogs. But what is the Federal Reserve supposed to be?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it's supposed to be a system set in place so we don't go bankrupt, I guess you could say.
So that's supposed to be like our own central bank?
It's a central bank. It's a private bank though.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right.
And the players in it was the biggest player is Rothschild. Mm-hmm. But then you have his representative Warburg and J.P. Morgan, and what was the senator?
Aldrich.
Yeah, Senator Aldrich. He played a role in helping this thing pass, the Federal Reserve Act. But when you go back to what was said back in 1790, when he said, "Give me control of a nation's currency, and I care not about its laws." Right. This is exactly what happened. And like Will said earlier, this is the fourth bank, central bank. It's not the very first time. This is the fourth time that it's happened.
Mm.
But we've been so blinded and haven't been doing our due diligence to sit back and just look at things that we've been taken by it. And one of the biggest things that I think Will can speak a little bit more on is the Communist Manifesto and how this brings it about. You know, when Rothschild said, "Hey, give me control of a nation's currency, and I care not about the law," that was the very thing. You know, because now you don't have any constitutional law that's being applied. What you have now is a bunch of policies, and when you have a bunch of policies in place, it's no longer a constitution; it's a corporation, which is something that we should probably talk about a little bit more, because then you have the Act of 1871. You know, the Constitution for the United States of America, and not the Constitution for the United States of America. But I'll let Will talk a little bit more about the Federal Reserve and who are the major players and what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, that's what I want to get down to, the major players.
Okay.
From
So
we know, well, I know you just mentioned some major players, but are there some that you think people would know by name today?
yeah, Rothschild. But
No, I'm talking about that are living
current,
today. Well, we know the Rothschild family still lives,
still, yeah, they still
but
reign supreme over
are there
monetary.
are there others that
Rockefeller,
people
J.D. Rockefeller.
Rockefeller and
Rockefeller, right,
Morgan,
right,
yeah.
right.
Mhm.
But so, but I'm always all about the history. Get the people, if you're really interested in the monetary history, definitely get this book, The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Second Look at the Federal Reserve. Historically, it goes over it from the beginning of time almost to the present. So, like I said, it was the fourth central bank had to be called the Federal Reserve, because the population of this country, the people in this country, weren't going to accept another Federal Reserve, another central bank.
Central bank,
Just like we weren't going to accept any more wars. This is from even the War of 1812 forward. Now, I exclude the Revolutionary War because that was the war of independence for this country. They were fighting against England. But all these other internal wars, the War of 1812, the Civil War, and then the war that we've been involved with, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, the mass of the people are never for this stuff. Okay. We, the people, is where the power lies. Okay. We have the power to challenge all of these contradictions that exist, whether it be wars, slavery, whatever the question may be. So with the banks, the people weren't going to accept another central bank, and they knew it, but they knew the people weren't going to do their research. History does nothing but repeat itself. History repeats itself. History repeats itself, because we don't go back and take a look at how something happened. So we readily accept whatever's presented to us from these criminals that we put in these offices. So in 1913, that's what this book goes over, the story of the creation of the Federal Reserve. They said, okay, we're going to have to come up with a new name. The primary architect was Paul Warburg, who was an agent for the Rothschilds out of Europe. Okay, the Rothschilds reigned supreme over banking since the 1700s for sure. Okay. When they went to this place called Jekyll Island, that's why they call the book Creature from Jekyll Island. They took this secret tour in 1913 to figure out how are we going to introduce another central bank to this country, because there's been adamant resistance from, Tony had mentioned Andrew Jackson, but even before Andrew Jackson, the founding forefathers at the Constitutional Convention were adamantly opposed. I read to you earlier, Article 1, Section 8 and 10.
Yeah,
no, Hamilton was a supporter. Yeah, he was a supporter of the banks. Hamilton was. But I'm talking about Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, even George Washington. They were adamantly opposed to the creation of a central bank, and central bank what promotes a paper money supply, a paper money system, and tries to take you away from the gold standard. So it's called fiat money. Fiat money is fake money. Essentially, it's fake money. It's money that's not tied to any gold or silver. The gold and silver moderates the medium of exchange. And I don't have all these banking terms down, so correct me if I'm wrong if you hear me saying this, but I'm trying to give you the generalities here. Bottom line is the people didn't want it, so they had to come up with a name, and they came up with Federal and Reserve. And like Jay said at the beginning of this show, there's nothing federal about it, and there's no reserves, okay? They just could throw a name at us, anything but a central bank, And we, the people, as ignorant as we are, since we don't know history, we accepted it. Okay. And we accepted it through a president called Wilson. What's his name? President Wilson. I forget his first name, but President Wilson, 1914, signed the 1913 signed the Federal Reserve Act. Woodrow Wilson.
Woodrow Wilson.
Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act into existence, and he regretted it later on. He made a comment, and I think it's authentic. He made a comment. I'm paraphrasing that he said that I've made the biggest mistake in my thing. I've enslaved the people to the banks. So it's paraphrasing. Go back and look at it. That comment is in this book. I don't know exactly where it's at, but it's in this book. And he's talking about that he made a big mistake.
Well, see, and Will, just to add on that same thing, when you said history repeat itself, it does, because Madison did the same thing. It was Hamilton who convinced them when they won the argument about creating a national bank, the first Bank of America. And when he reluctantly did it, but then after that 20-year charter, this is what me and you were talking about a couple of days ago, when they had a 40-year charter. And so when he first did it, the first 20 years, Madison reluctantly did it. But then the second time it was up, they didn't want to do it. And I think it was Nathan Rothschild at that time, when he said, hey, listen, you either going to renew the charter or either you're going to look at another war. And that was the War of 1812.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, the war in the colonies. So they've imposed these wars on us.
While you're there, Will, I pulled up a map so everybody can know where Jekyll Island is located.
Okay, Georgia.
Georgia, yeah, Glenn County.
Off the coast. Yeah.
And Nelson Aldrich. Nelson Aldrich was a senator at that time, a very influential senator. I think he was the father-in-law of Nelson Rockefeller, of one of the Rockefellers.
Yeah,
and he had a property there. Yeah, his property was on Jekyll Island, so that's why they met there. And they had to go in disguise, but it goes through all the details of this. But I don't want to bog people down with the details of that. But essentially, that's where it was held there in secret. And when they came back, they said, we're going to call it the Federal Reserve. And ironically, when the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the bill was signed. What happened in 1914? World War I broke out.
Yeah.
So what these bankers do is they make their whole motivation is debt. They don't ever want you to pay off the debt. And if they can keep you in internal war, that's their primary objective, is to keep you in internal war and keep you at each other's throats. And then they're going to be on both sides supplying the money or funding our ignorance, our stupidity. So I think it's really time for us to focus on how we played a role in this historical event or events. We've allowed this to happen. We, the people, the Constitution was written for us. At the Constitutional Convention, when Benjamin Franklin came out, somebody asked him, and I'm just paraphrasing once again, they asked him, what kind of government do we have? And he said, a constitutional republic if you can keep it. A constitutional republic if you can keep it. Somebody put something in the chat there. What's that, Jay? The men.
Kiki said she watched The Man Who Ran America. She said it was very interesting.
Oh, okay. That's a movie?
I think it's a movie or a documentary.
Tell her put more details in there or something. Where's it at? Netflix or where? Just tell her put that in there too.
Yeah, she hear you. I'm sure she'll throw that up.
Okay, all right. So, where's that? I hate when I get sidetracked. But we talked about the founding forefathers.
You mentioned that banks don't want you paying off the debt because that's cash flow for them because of the interest and things like that, right?
Right. What the whole motivation is, remember, banks are just empty buildings, okay? They get their livelihood from the depositors, which are me and you, which are the consumers, me and you. When we take money into the bank can lend out 10 times that amount. So their whole motivation is to get us to go to the banks and put money in so they can lend out 10 times or more of that amount, like we talked about earlier.
It's like per dollar, right?
Yeah, per dollar. So if you put $1 in, they can lend out 1,000, right? Or $10. I'm sorry, $10, 10 times that amount is 1,000.
It could be 10 times. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's more than that now. I think they can fractional reserve banking. They made the rules more lenient. They can lend out more than that. But the whole idea
Is that through the FDIC? Does the FDIC give them
Yeah,
that authority, or is it coming directly from the
no,
federal?
no.
No,
The
that comes straight from
FDIC,
the federal.
the FDIC wasn't created till later. So let's go back now. So the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, along with the IRS, the Federal Reserve Agent. The IRS was the Internal Revenue Service, and they are the collection agency for the Federal Reserve. Ironically, they need 87. How many? 87,000. They need
Yeah,
87,000.
87,000. That's what they said. 87,000.
Yeah, they're gonna bring 87,000 more agents out here right now. Who's asking for 87,000 more agents? None of us. None of us. But that's part of this so-called what do you call it? The bill that just passed, the infrastructure, the inflation-proof bill, whatever it's called.
Yeah,
Infrastructure bill. But
yeah,
so
just a couple of days ago, yeah.
yeah. So just beware of that, because those 80,000 more agents are going to create audits for people that's making under 400,000, and that's where they're going to get to pay off this 700 billion or whatever that they've passed. Okay. So we gotta make sure that we understand whatever they do, we are the recipients of it. So why not us wake up and start to challenge what they're doing? That's why I read all this. That's why we read all this kind of stuff to say, listen, what is that we're doing wrong? I don't have no confidence and no trust in the government that we have in place right now. The people that we put in power are a representative of us, but we have to be the one to say, listen, the fault lies with us, because the Constitution is for us. So we've got to, and the only way I can deal with it is, okay, let me understand what's going on and then go after it. Now, I have personally tried that. Tony knows. I have personally tried to do things to bypass this Federal Reserve banking system in what they call what some people refer to as the sovereign movement, the patriot movement, etc. And I think we're on the right track. It's just that the problem is that waving the paper to these people, when these people only respond to brute force, doesn't get us anywhere. We're out there waving documents to say, hey, listen, I'm gonna free myself from the banking system because I got some documents. The way this country went against England was through revolution.
I'll say it again, Will. There has never been a country in the historicity of this planet who has ever done that. You wave some paperwork if you want to, you get your doors blown. So, and we just had a brutal reminder of that. I think last week, was it? What did they do to the man down there in Mar-a-Lago?
Mar-a-Lago,
the same thing. He was cooperating with the DOJ and FBI, and they did the same thing. And they told him, "Hey, look, just put another lock on the safe and yada yada yada." And they came and did what they did, brute force.
And that's starting to bite them in the rear end now.
Oh
yeah.
But and let me just go ahead. So,
well, I'm just saying, I hate to keep beating it in the head, beating the dead horse, but we have to address the elephant in the room. So I'll keep saying it, is that while we're talking about the Federal Reserve and all of the things that happen with it, we need to look at the other side of the coin too, because now all of these offshoot things that happens, like racism and Black Lives Matters and the Me Too movement and LGBTQ XYZ or whatever it is, at this point we have to look at all of those things and say, you know what, these are offshoots of that money. So this is what they do when they drive a wedge down the center. They don't want you through COINTELPRO. They do not want men to unite, because if men can sit back and say, you know what, enough is enough, then that's what puts fear into them. And they can't have that. So an offshoot of that is to create racism. That's the same thing they did in the Civil War. That's the same thing that they're doing now with all of these offshoot things. Creating racism, systemic racism. Look at all of the per capita, how many white cops killed black men, or vice versa. And we coming out with all of these statistics to show nothing, because it does nothing for us at the end of the day. At the end of the day, what's going to happen is you're going to fall in line and you're going to do what we ask you to, because I don't care about your law. I got the money. And that's what we have to follow, is the money.
The money.
Exactly. And so, and now we're talking. We alluded to the Republican Party under Trump, and I want to say that both of the parties are just as crooked because 911 was corrupt under Bush.
under Bush.
Okay, the first Gulf War was corrupt. I mean, the Vietnam, Lebanon. These are all happening under both of these administrations. So we have a uniparty, or we have one party here that make us think that there's two different parties. Okay. Now the conservative movement, I consider Trump part of the conservative movement, just like I consider I guess you would say who else opposed JFK was a Democrat, but he did go against the CIA, the Federal Reserve banking system, nuclear warheads for China and Israel. So I support any administration that's going to be truly representative of the people of this country. And what I found right now that both of them has severely sold us out. And right now the Democrats are selling out this community. And I know that one lady on here that criticized us, that is a Democrat. And I'm saying, hey, cool. I'm not going to sit up and argue with you trying to make you Republican or whatever, because they both are corrupt parties. Okay. Historically, they just flip flop. They flip flop back and forth. The same Democratic Party, those liberal principles today, was the Republican Party that freed us, that supposedly freed us from slavery during or at the end of the Civil War. Okay, not the beginning of it. Did she type something else? I want to be able to respond to that kind of stuff if I could.
She's saying Ford, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Edison, and Morgan supposedly built America. When she's speaking Carnegie, she's not speaking of Dale. I think she's speaking Andrew Carnegie.
Yeah, the steel magnet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, well, they played a role in it, but the people, the bankers are the ones that do that actually supply the funds for them people to do the building. Okay, so these guys are peons compared to the bankers. The bankers sit back in their plush, high rise buildings or whatever, and they just put out the fake money, the fiat money, and then you end up working your life to pay that money back when they didn't lend you anything in the first place. The debt was created when we signed the note and start paying the money back. That's the debt. They didn't ever give us that money. They just said they did through these fictitious paper trails that they create. Okay. So now Tony was talking about both the administration, what's going on currently with Trump, and they've done it to Republicans and Democrats have both done it to us. And what we're going to have to do is say at some juncture create our own party, or either become a theocracy if we can get these fake Christians up out of these churches and do something other than just sit up and play this role of reading the Bible that they don't even know the Bible, but reading the Bible as though they are going to make some type of changes by waiting on something to happen. We are put here to do something. My people are destroyed by lack of knowledge. That means we have to go get the knowledge and then perform it. So the false flags in history has always kept us at wit's end. We keep fighting against one another over crazy stuff like racism, what's going on in Ukraine. We probably can go into World War III with this whole Ukraine issue. And that's another false flag, because that was instigated by this government. The same thing that's going on right now here is we would have leveled Cuba in 1961, or I forget the exact year, but the early 60s, if the Russians hadn't taken the
weapons out.
If they hadn't taken the missiles out of Cuba in early 60s, we would have leveled Cuba. And so what Russia said was, don't mess with our territory, or either I'm going to come to its defense. But once you study history, you understand why Hitler attacked Poland. What's going on in Poland right now, what's going on in Ukraine right now is the same thing that went on with Poland.
Well,
all
hold on,
these
Will.
false flags.
Hold on, Will. Before you go into the Poland thing with Hitler, you should go back and explain why Russia, did what they did in Cuba, and what JFK responded and said, okay, we'll withdraw, because they didn't want them setting up forces around Russia, missiles around, the UN. So Russia was like, well, hey, if y'all gonna do that, if y'all gonna set up forces and have a UN right around our territory, our borders, then guess what we'll do? We'll use our ally and put missiles right there where Cuba is.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, wait, you can't do that. JFK was like, you can't do that. So they, undercover, they just kind of signed a treaty. It was supposed to be a treaty, but they withdrew.
Well, they worked out an agreement.
They
There's a good
worked out
movie
an
out on that.
agreement,
Yeah,
and they withdrew.
Yeah, there's a good movie on that JFK. If you look at that movie, the Cuban Missile Crisis of JFK, that was created by, I think it was Stone, Oliver Stone. He made one of those. JFK, I know he made. I think he made the Cuban Missile Crisis too, or somebody else did. But it showed, but if you read Michael Collins Piper's book, which is he wrote for the American Free Press, but wrote a lot of good information on Zionism and what's going on in the Middle East. But that book there showed that Turkey, we had missiles in Turkey, and I think there was an agreement that we take the missiles out of Turkey, and then they'll take their missiles out of Cuba. So it's always, you can't just believe when this country, when they get on this mainstream media and start bombarding us with their news, and I'm talking about both Fox and CNN and MSNBC or whatever they call it. And I would try to watch both to get a balance. I'm not telling people don't watch the news, but watch both. Okay, and there's all kinds of alternatives, huh?
CNN, I call it the Crying Negro Network.
That's true. Don't start me laughing, man. I'm trying to be serious. What was it again? The crying what?
Crying Negro Network.
Now there's gonna be people gonna be offended by that. We're gonna get some stuff in the chat. Watch. Oh, anyway. So, so what's going on in Ukraine? What's going on in Ukraine? Fake news. You're right, and that's really what it is. Okay, and Trump hit nail on. Okay, and he's not a career politician, and that's one reason why I like Trump, because he's not a career politician. Okay, he just came in the scene and started yapping off stuff and started pulling us out of NATO, pulling us out of the WHO, the World Health Organization, NATO, the North American Treaty Organization, and I mean that's what really impressed me, because I mean
and what they don't understand, when he pulled us out of the WHO organization, what people get mad at that, but what they not realizing is the United States was paying $500 billion into the WHO organization. China was only putting in like $49 million.
And they had more say-so in it than we did.
Over the United States in the WHO.
Right. The biggest shareholder, the biggest stakeholder should have the most to say. That, you know, be able to govern the policy. We won't govern no policies in WHO. But right. This book here goes Preach from Jekyll Island once again. It talks about why. Now, Jay, you asked about the IMF, the IMF and the World Bank. Okay. So right. that comes a little bit after. So once they created the Federal Reserve, World War I starts. They financing all sides of that World War I. The bankers are making money. We're out there dying. Okay, we are the ones dying. Our families are being disrupted. Economies disrupted. Everything is being uprooted while they're making money. They keep creating these wars. What happens? The Bolshevik Revolution happens in Russia in 1917. Financed by Wall Street. Okay, financed by the bankers. World War II starts. These are all false flags. Sinking of the Lusitania for World War I. Okay, the Bolshevik Revolution was financed by Wall Street. Don't ever think that the Bolshevik Revolution, the communist revolution, that we're a capitalist country, we're supposed to be adamantly opposed to communism, yet and still we supported Trotsky and Lenin in the Bolshevik Revolution. They came to power, and it was nowhere near what they said they were coming to power for. They were supposed to be coming to power to represent the proletariat. That's the working class. That was not it. They used that to get the Bolsheviks to fight for them. And once they did that, once they won the revolution, then the Bolsheviks took over and inserted their agenda through implementation from the bankers on Wall Street. The bankers on Wall Street is what dictated that policy. Then comes the rise of Hitler, of course. World War II, we go into that on another false flag, because Pearl Harbor, we knew we provoked the Japanese, just like we provoked the sinking of the Lusitania. That's in here.
Yep.
Pearl Harbor, I believe that's in here too. We provoked all that, just like we provoked NATO in Ukraine right here. We provoked that. All we had to do was say, NATO, stand down. But we didn't do that. We knew exactly what we were doing. But we, the people, have to know what's going on, because we are just as guilty if World War III breaks out. We are just as guilty for World War III breaking out as the administrators are of creating the whole false flag setting of it. 9/11, another false flag. The Gulf War, there were no weapons of mass destruction. Come on, I mean, I'm just naming all these events. The Gulf of Tonkin and Vietnam War. These are all false flag events to get us to go to war. And when we go to war, they make money. The way they get out of inflation is war.
Right.
Now, I want to say that. So you can rest assured, we're going to have a World War III if this so-called inflation, increase itself or manifest itself, it gets more detrimental. Only
Well,
way to
it doesn't
done.
have to be it doesn't have to be a war per se,
Yeah,
but it can be any type of
conflict.
worldwide disease, just like they try to do with COVID or anything like that.
The
And then
monkeypox.
monkeypox. So anything that has to do is like a national emergency. They can take advantage of it. Never let a good what is it? Will
Rahm
never let
Emanuel.
yeah.
Never let
Rahm
good
Emanuel,
crisis go to waste.
Yeah, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
So they'll take advantage of it.
So if we can
I
just
say it's gonna be another disease for the next election, 2024.
and why you say that, Jay?
Because
What's-
Democrats pushing these diseases, man. They trying to cheat the election. And see, here's the thing:
Republican hoots with it.
people have gotten upset with me because they're Democrat. And here's what I asked them: why are you a Democrat? Nobody can give me an answer. But I've always been a Democrat. My mama was a Democrat. I said, but why are you a Democrat? What do you know about any other party other than Democrat? What are the platforms to any other party other than Democrat? I said, do any other party share your same views, or do you just share the views of the Democrat because that's all you know? No one can really give me an answer.
Lyndon B. Johnson.
I'll have
these niggas voting. I'll have these Negroes voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
And what did he do to get that?
I'm saying 50.
But what did he do to get that? What did he do? Because the handouts is what get us.
That's what I was about to say. He gave us free stuff.
Yeah. What is it? Open.
And what happened? He gave us free stuff and told our black women, if you want this free stuff, which is guaranteed, your man can't live in your house with you. And that's when we started to lose our women, because what they do, they took what was guaranteed versus what we should be earning.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to I don't want to butcher your name, but you got a long name here. Like Cal in the CV, watching right now from Twitch. And shout out to those watching on Twitch and YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to the video. Please, we appreciate that. Let's see.
Read the comment there.
If you make 400K or less, you are of zero concern to any politician. No party leader gives an F about me or any of you.
I didn't understand all of it, but I'm trying to
read
it.
Pretty much he said if you're making less than 400K, you are no concern to any politician. They don't give a fuck about either of us.
Right.
Yeah.
True.
Tink just said destroy the black families. When we talking about the free stuff which you just mentioned, he just said that destroyed the black families.
Now be careful. Be careful with that when we say that, because I even find myself, when we talk about what they did, they can do anything they want to do. Did we follow the script? We followed the script. So the problem is we did that to ourselves. We didn't have to accept that.
Right.
So we destroyed the black family. We did.
We allowed their program to take hold of us.
Yeah. Right.
Just like we cry about crack.
It's just like with systemic racism. You know, when you have a choice that you can make. Sure, systemic racism exists, but I have to say, from my perspective, it didn't exist for me. But I recognize it exists. And why does it exist? Because people put themselves and make the choices that they make. You know that they got projects, and you know within the projects, there are going to be what you would consider the lower echelon of people. So, you know, in the projects, that's where the police and the sheriffs are going to go, because that's where most of the drug deals go down. So when you're in projects, you are a party to that. So
I got a question for you, Tone.
Okay, but if you want to get out of the projects, it's a choice you make. If you choose to stay in that lifestyle, that's a choice you make. And now you're becoming a part of systemic racism. Well, if you want to call it racism. If you choose to get out of that situation, then you don't know systemic racism like somebody else who lives it knows it. Go
It's
ahead,
just like
Will.
it's just like a heated argument. If you ain't got to participate in the argument, let them argue by themselves.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask either one of y'all a question. Those people, those guys that were killed by the cops, were they freedom fighters? Were they part of revolutionary organizations or something?
Not
What
that
were
I'm
they?
aware of. Not that I'm aware of.
Any of them freedom fighters? Potential?
Which
Uh,
guys?
any of the guys that we cry racism about that have been killed by the cops in the last couple of years? I
No.
mean, there's more white people killed by the cops anyway than black people, but
I was going to put those stats up, but I'm glad you mentioned
yeah,
that.
yeah.
No,
But
they were
not that I'm aware of.
yeah, they were victim of circumstances. They were
Yeah.
victims of their own circumstances. They put themselves in that situation. Now, I mean, granted, either one of us can get pulled over by the police and get shot, but by that same police, but our chances are greatly reduced when you cooperate and do what you're supposed to do instead of trying to deny. When you have 10 officers telling you to put your hands behind your back and you're steady jerking your hand away trying to plead your case, at some point they're going to escalate. I know that because I'm prior law enforcement, and I'm trying to tell you that if at some point you keep doing that, they're going to escalate it and they're going to body slam you. And however it goes from that point forward, that's what's going to happen. I can't breathe. Well, you should have just went on ahead and cuffed up instead of trying, because I'd rather see you have your day in court versus dead on the side of the street. But a lot of us get all in our emotions and feelings and want to argue and plead and do all this other stuff, and 9 times out of 10 come to find out we were in the wrong anyway. We could have de-escalated the problem, but we put ourselves in that situation. So now we become a victim of our own circumstances through systemic racism because that was a choice that you made. Not saying that, hey, somebody could come blow me, but I'm just saying your chances are greatly reduced.
Right.
Hey, and Jay had a show. Jay, can we plug your show right quick? Or if you go check your archives, you did a show on how to conduct yourself when stopped by the police. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think it was titled "Relationship Between Blacks and Cops."
That's the segue from what Tony was just saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned a lot of the same thing. First of all, because I don't want us to go off topic, but I do want to mention this real quick in regards to that. I get pulled over a lot. I drive a Mercedes. I got a convertible. Most of the time, I don't even have my convertible top down, especially at night. So I just don't want to be spotted. But I get pulled over a lot, and I never get tickets. First of all, if they're in an authority position, so give them the authority. So when they pull me over, this is the first thing I say to them. I say, good evening, officer, and I want to thank you for your service. So if they have, see, one thing you got to realize, folks, is many of us have worked in a workplace with someone who could be going through something in their home, and they bring their problems to work with them. They're going to have a problem driving to work. Somebody cut them off or did something in the traffic, pissed them off. They're at rage because they couldn't hit that person in road rage or fight them because of what they did. They put their finger up at them in traffic. They pissed off. So they come to work and they still mad. Their wives or their husbands pissed off. They come to work pissed off. So cops are the same way. They could be mad at something that went on at home, just like you could be mad at something about your home, about your job, and carry that anger at work with you. It could be reversed as well. So when a cop, you just never know what mind frame that cop can be in. And here's something that was said to me long ago: be nice, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. So just because they're in an authority position, and they have authority over you in this sense, doesn't mean that we have to challenge their authority because we disagree with what they do. So don't don't get the egos riled up because they don't care how much of the Constitution you know. and you want to set your camera up and try to show Facebook and go live and say, well, I know the Constitution. Looking out, they don't care. They're out there to meet quotas or whatever it is that they got to do, or whatever their job is to do that job and tell you, hey, this is what's going on. In some cases, some of them are waiting for you to buck back with them because they just want to put their hands on somebody. And all of us have been in a situation we were like, man, I wish he'd just say something to me one time. We've been through school, on the job, and we all had somebody that we just want them to say something wrong to us so we can give them the hands. We all have been through that, right? So those cops could be in the same situation. But guess what happens? When they pull you over and they walk up to you and say, hello, sir. And I say, oh, hello to you, sir. And I want to first thank you for your service. What that does is they're starting to be diffused from that point on. But when you start to challenge them, talking about you know the Constitution, and most people don't know the Constitution. They just talking that they know the Constitution. I know my rights and all this. No, you don't know your rights. Your right is to sit there and just cooperate at that moment. So you sit there and you cooperate, right? And you and here's the thing: even if you disagree to that cop pulling you over, he says some things to you. Listen, cooperate. Get to where you need to go to safely. And once you get there, you got his information. You get to where you're going to go safely, and guess what you do from that point? Contact the internal affairs. If you contact his sergeant or his captain, most of the time, they're going to cover for him. Cops don't snitch on cops. The internal affairs police the police. And this is something that I know this from experience because I had to take that route, contact the internal affairs on the cop. And guess what happened? The internal affairs called me into their office to meet with that cop. And they were the mediator between me and that cop. And at the end of the day, that cop and I, we shook hands and it was a closed deal. Every time that cop saw me on the street from then on, hey, Mr. Lee, how you doing? How things going in the neighborhood? See what happens, folks, bucking back at the police is not going to get their respect. Following proper protocols is what's going to get them respect, if that makes sense. Tony being in law enforcement before, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is exactly the route that I would suggest people to take.
I agree.
And going back to what you're saying, Jay, when you said earlier about, you know, people want to stop and start Facebooking, you know, they turn on the camera so they get on Facebook and stuff and talking about they know their rights and they know their Constitution. You don't have a Constitution at that point. When you're a driver, and see, this is what I'm saying, when you're driving, you have a driver's license, the Constitution no longer applies to you if you knew anything about that, because now what applies to you is administrative policies and state and ordinances. That's what applies to you. The Constitution doesn't apply to you. Now, but going back to what we were talking about earlier, when it comes to that Constitution, we've given that up a long time ago. But of course, it's up to we, the people, to get it back. We have the power to get it back. But I think what we tend to do is we tend to let the politicians do what they do, and we just suffer the consequences and suffer the fate. That's what we tend to do instead of standing up. And what was the quote, Will? Somebody, I forget who said it, but they said something to the effect of, all it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So
Thomas
while
Jefferson.
you're sitting there doing nothing, you know, instead of letting the camera roll for these people that get into fights and fisticuffs, instead of everybody pulling out the camera phone and taking a picture of it, why don't you go break up the fight, you know, and try to get some order in it? But no, we want to just let them fight and keep putting it so we can get, you know, so we could put it on World Star, you know, something like that. So
we can't afford that, folks.
Looking for likes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was Thomas Jefferson said, "What does it take for good men to do nothing? What does it take for tyranny to prevail? Is for good men to do nothing." And I'm paraphrasing.
But Jay, with all of the stuff that we talked about, when we talked about the Federal Reserve and when we talked about the Constitution and the policies and slavery and everything, when you follow the money and you look at the pattern of how the money goes, you have to look at the common denominator. And it's something that we mentioned a few times tonight, but we haven't really dove into it. And I think this is the perfect segue to dive right into it. We have to look at the common denominator of who's behind that money. In all these scenarios, who is it? They pretend to be white people, but they're really not white. We have to start at some point discussing the elephant in the room. These so-called Jews, when we talk about Warburg, Rockefeller, Rothschild, J.P. Morgan, Mr. Peabody, I forget his name, Stanley Peabody, all of these major players, Carnegie, all of these major players, who were they at heart? They were Jews. And now we have to start looking at the relationship between, okay, it can't be Jews, can it? No. I mean, well, the facts don't lie. History, when you start looking at it and do a deep dive, it's not lying to you. These people are the common denominator for everything that's going on. I mean, besides us playing victim role and what we can do, you have to look at all of the things and how they line up. The Federal Reserve, 911. They were even behind 911. It was a perfect segue for us to go in there over to the Middle East and break up the Middle East even further. But we have to start addressing the Jewish question.
And the Middle East is about
the same thing that Hitler did the same thing. If anybody knows about his book, his personal biography, Mein Kampf, he mentions that. He talks about how he knew who the enemy was, and that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to get rid of those people in his country because he knew what they were about. And I think, Will, what was it, like over 120 countries that they were kicked out of because of their mischievousness and what they did over in Europe. And they brought the same thing over here to the States.
Hitchcock wrote,
and so we have to start addressing that.
The Synagogue of Satan by Hitchcock. He goes over each country that they've been evicted from. Now let me say this, because you get easily branded with this stuff. That's why I try to tell people, look, the reason why we're dealing with the Jewish question is because it's not dealt with. Okay, it's not dealt with, but it's all over the information that we read. We want to introduce it, and we want to hear where we're wrong. Prove us wrong in what the information we're presenting to you about any race. But this in specific right now, we're talking about, because the Jews are the ones that really play a huge role in banking, just like blacks in sports in this country or entertainment. That's not a conspiracy. That's true. And so it's not a conspiracy. It's true that these Jews have been historically played a key role in these major catastrophes throughout history, but they're not talked about much at all in the history books. And we're wondering why. They played a key role in slavery, in the so-called slavery, slave trade and everything, but they're not mentioned. That's why the Nation of Islam wrote their book, The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. Now, let me just segue right in that. I'm glad you brought that up. Let me talk. Let's go into Civil War. Let me read the summary of these two here about the Civil War, and let's see what Tony was just talking about. So, on page 375 of The Creature from Jekyll Island, we're going to summarize the Civil War, and then I'm going to do on a 395 as well. Continue on there. So, the economic chaos and conflict of this period was a major cause of the Civil War. Lincoln made it clear during his public speeches that slavery was not the issue. The basic problem was that the North and South were dependent on each other for trade. The industrialized North sold its products to the South, which sold its cotton to the North. The South also had a similar trade with Europe. And that was an annoyance to the North. Europe was selling many products at lower prices, and the North was losing market share. Northern politicians passed protectionist legislation, putting import duties on industrial products. This all but stopped the information of European goods and forced the South to buy from the North at higher prices. Europe retaliated by curtailing the purchase of the American cotton. That hurt the South even more. It was classic it was a classic case of legalized plunder, and the South wanted out. Now that's on page 375, and we're going to continue that on page 395. They got two summaries here. It says here, America's bloodiest and most devastating war was fought not over the issue of freedom versus slavery, but because of clashing economic interests. At the heart of this conflict were questions of legalized plunder, banking monopolies, and even European territorial expansion into Latin America. The bootprint of the Rothschild formula is unmistakable across the graves of American soldiers on both sides. This is not us saying this, okay? We're reading this information in the books, okay? We're getting this information from qualified historians that have done fanatical research and have risked their lives to come up with an alternative view to history. Let me finish now. So it said here, the Rothschild formula. This is what Tony was talking about. I don't want people calling up, putting in the text thing later on, oh, Tony's an anti-Semite. He's just saying what this book, we're just saying what this book is saying, and what a lot of other books that we've read is saying, but we've noticed that the mainstream media will not disseminate this type of information. Why not? So in the North, neither greenbacks, taxes, nor war bonds were enough to finance the war. So a national banking system was created to convert green bonds into fiat money. And the people lost over half of their monetary assets to the hidden tax of inflation. In the South, now that was in the North, in the South, printing presses accomplished the same effect, and the monetary loss was total. The issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation by Lincoln and the naval assistance offered by the Tsar Alexander II. This is what me and you were talking about the other day, Tony. Let me just start that again. The issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation by Lincoln and the naval assistance offered by Tsar Alexander II were largely responsible for keeping England and France from intervening in the war on the side of the Confederacy. So the England and France wanted to come in on the side of the Confederacy, but Lincoln issued this Emancipation Proclamation and had Russia, with Tsar Alexander II was the Tsar of Russia. Okay, so they were doing that to keep him from siding with the Confederacy. Lincoln was assassinated by a member of the Knights of the Golden Circle, a secret society with rumored ties to American politicians and British financiers. So America and Britain are the ones that pretty much were responsible for the death of Lincoln. Tsar Alexander was assassinated a few years later by a member of the People's Will, a nihilist secret society in Russia with rumored ties to financiers in New York City, specifically Jacob Schiff, who was a Jew, and the firm of Kuhn, Loeb and Company. As for the creature of central banking, there had been some victories and some defeats. The greenbacks are the money that was created by Lincoln in the Civil War because he was bypassing the bankers. So I applaud Lincoln for that. Okay. The greenbacks had for a while deprived the bankers of their override on a small portion of government debt, but the National Banking Act quickly put a stop to that. Furthermore, by using government bonds as backing for the money supply, it locked the nation into perpetual debt. The foundation was firmly in place, but the ultimate structure still needed to be erected. The monetary system was yet to be concentrated into a central bank. So the central bank didn't exist then, but they would be coming up with creative ways. The central bank, what they're talking about, is the Federal Reserve that was created in 1913. So it said the monetary system was yet to be concentrated into one central bank mechanism, and the control was yet to be taken away from the politicians and placed into the hands of the bankers themselves. It was time for the creature to visit Congress. So what they're doing, they're going to go into the next chapter and talk about how the Federal Reserve was created. Now, Jay, you talked about the IMF and the World Bank. That was created at Bretton Woods in 1944. And what they wanted to do there was to use that as a bailout source. Now, I'm going to paraphrase here, and you can please go into the book and read it, okay? The IMF and the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank were created to take successful countries to be able to help bail out poorly managed companies that didn't come up, didn't meet the criteria. It's the same thing that Johnson did for the black community, supposedly with helping bail the black community out of their financial devastation. It wasn't to benefit. We thought it was to benefit us, just like the bankers thought. Just when the countries out there were being bailed out through the IMF and the World Bank, it was in the interest of the World Bank and the IMF to bail out struggling countries that were dealing with financial situations. Just like in the black community, I'm just trying to sort of parallels here. So Johnson created the Open Society? I mean, just essentially, he strengthened the welfare state that was introduced by Hoover and FDR in the late 20s and early 30s. So it called fractional reserve banking. That's what this called for the bankers. It's fractional reserve banking. And you're right, though, Lionel. So when the IMF and the World Bank became essentially the central bank for the world, along with the Bank for International Settlements. So there's BIS. There's another category that he doesn't get into. Henry Mankow gets into that in his piece on Mankow is Mankow, and he wrote a piece that extended and talked about the Bank for International Settlements as well. That's the central bank. So everybody's trying to duplicate this Federal Reserve Bank that participates in FRB, fractional reserve banking, and that's what they're doing in the scenarios of the black community with Johnson's implementation of this welfare state. What we're doing is creating welfare states around the world by telling people, oh, we're going to bail you out because you mismanage your funds. But then the bailout is to the advantage of the bankers. But who do we have to blame? We can't blame the bankers for all this. We got to blame the people. Just like we said, we're going to blame our people for accepting Johnson's bailout. Well, those poor countries that are struggling out there financially, they're the same way. We can't just sit up and say, well, the bankers are evil people. What about the people that's accepting these funds? They're just as distorted, just as evil. So we've got to learn that the elephant in the room is what we need to do to change those conditions, as opposed to sitting up and accepting these hands-out. Learn history. And so, Russell was talking about real time. Real time, that's interesting that he would say real time, because I don't want to go back in and have to experience slavery. All I want to do is be able to tell people about it and say, hey, listen, I don't want to go back in there. If it was as bad as they say it was, I don't need to go back there and experience it. I can experience it in real time right now. And this is a form of slavery right now, what we call wage slavery and the welfare state. We've created this ourselves, but we're sitting up blaming them. That's why we're never going to get out of it as long as we're blaming them. Never. Let me stop there because I'm getting to go in circles there. Somebody else can chime in.
Tony, do you want to add anything to that?
No. That's complete. When he says circle, that's 360 right there. So, I mean, I'm sure another question will come up and I'll chime in on it.
All right.
Yeah.
I don't have anything on my end, but I do.
Does anybody in the chat have any questions?
Yeah, let's take some Q&As. Take some Q&A. I'm going to give a shout out to my man, Lionel Cox, for chiming in. Thank you, Lionel Cox. I really appreciate you coming in.
Lionel, thanks a lot.
Martina Lee has been in. Kiki Washington. Always a pleasure.
What about that? What about the YouTube thing? Anybody making comments on the YouTube? Me and Tony.
We have some YouTube watchers. We have, but no one chimed in yet.
Okay.
The gentleman by the name of Kyle in the CB. Shout out to him also.
Oh yeah, Kyle said he had to go to bed. It's getting late.
Yeah.
But he says, look at what he says. He said, but you know, you have allies that are embarrassed about our history. I'm one of them. I'm embarrassed about our history now that I know that we did all the glorious stuff, but there's the dark side as well that we have to talk about.
That's right.
We have to talk about it. And because we got a dark side right now today. The dark side today is, we love to talk about racism, but we never like to talk about what our own contradictions are. We talk about a police killing somebody in Milwaukee or wherever, but then in Chicago, You killed 16, I think 16 people just killed just last weekend in Chicago, or shot or whatever. And this was primarily blacks on blacks, if I'm understanding it right.
Nobody talks about that.
Well, we don't talk about that. And then when Giuliani brings up the thing, yeah, but y'all ranting and raving about a cop that killed a black person, but y'all kill each other more like over a weekend. And I'm paraphrasing what he said, but the point is, it's true. It slaps us right in the face. I mean, what are we to do? Just ignore this stuff? No, we need to take everything into consideration. I mean, it's just ridiculous. When are we going to take some type of responsibility for ourselves? What did Mel Gibson made a movie called what was it called, Tony? The movie I told you about that Mel Gibson made about the Indian tribes? Apocalypse.
Apocalypto.
And he said at the very beginning, which makes sense. He says, all great, and I'm paraphrasing, I had to do that on all great nations deteriorate from within before they're externally dominated or obliterated. But we do that individually in our own lives. We are deteriorating from within because we're not addressing our own personal contradictions. I know Jay does this show every week, and he is self-motivating and telling people to take responsibility for themselves. This is the type of stuff you need to be tuning into on every Monday night. I mean, just if it's a 30-minute call, an hour-long call, or whatever, it's great information. I mean, that information about the police, after he segued off of Tony, Jay's had a show that he did a couple of months ago, whatever. That's archived. People should go back and see that or learn how to conduct yourself with the police. This will cut down on the amount of deaths and the police violence that we're saying is happening. But we're totally detaching ourselves from it, like we have nothing to do with it. That's not true. Look at the show. But anyway, and the V for Vendetta. I want to say this, and I'll shut up. V for Vendetta, that movie, I like that movie, V for Vendetta, and that was made a couple of years ago, but it talks about, and the one good statement in that show says, the government should fear the people should not fear government.
Right.
Government should fear the people. Does this government fear us as the people? Whether it's a Republican or a Democratic situation, do they fear us? They don't, but we fear them.
There you go.
Excellent.
There you have it, gentlemen. What I want to do, because we want to give somebody their sleep time. So what I want to do is come back in about a couple of weeks, and I want to talk about what people don't know about Hitler.
Let's get to it.
No, that might be something they ain't ready to hear yet.
It's in here. It's in here.
There it is. Yeah,
I'll find that piece on Henry Mancow too, and I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Because there's definitely a different story with Hitler in World War II that we don't want to address. And if you want to talk about tyrants, we better talk about FDR being a tyrant. We better talk about Winston Churchill being a tyrant. If we want to talk about tyrants in World War II, if you're gonna call Hitler a tyrant, then they were tyrants too.
There you go.
Yeah. Also, with that thing with Hitler, what I like to do is suggest a documentary. I don't think you'll be able to find it on YouTube at this point. I think YouTube snatched it. But if you go to, say, BitChute, or if you go to another site called Odyssey, you might find it there. You probably will find it there. It's called Hitler versus the Jew World Order. I'll say it again. It's called Hitler versus the Jew World Order. It's kind of lengthy. I think maybe like 2-3 hours or so, but it's got some very good information about what Hitler went through, the kind of man that he was, and the whole nine, and how he was, dragged into World War II, and the whole nine. I mean, it's got some very enlightening information. I suggest before we actually do that show, people go ahead and try to seek out and find that. There you go, Hitler versus Jew World Order. Try to find that documentary. It's got some good jewels and nuggets in it.
And what we're doing here is we want to see what the truth is, our truer version of what we've been told. So we're siding with all the tyrants that you mainstream media told us is a tyrant. We want to go and check it out and see if it's truly. And you should do the same thing. Check out anything that's presented to you, especially from this fake news or this mainstream media of today. When they say that someone's a tyrant, to go check it out for yourself and see if it's true. And when we looked at Hitler's story, and look here, I don't have no reason to protect Hitler. I'm not trying to protect Hitler. I'm just searching for a truer version that was the truth, or a truer version like the Bible says we should do. Seek ye the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
But it will piss you off first.
Hey, let me ask you a question, Jay. I'll leave you with this.
Yeah.
Since my man has been in office, the name that I shall not mention, but since he and his administration have been in office, now you know how generally like they show the 45, number 45. And when I talk about 45, I'm talking about the guy before him, the president before him. Usually they would show a picture, you know, some of the news people, news reporters or journalists, they would be in what we call the Oval Office. Okay. Now, since number 46 has been in office, have you ever at any point since he's been in office seen him in the Oval Office? Or have you just seen him sitting in front of a desk with a picture of outside with a flag? Have you ever seen him inside the Oval Office talking to his generals or anybody like that? I'm going to just ask that question because I haven't. Since he's been in office, I haven't seen him.
No.
That's all I'm saying. There was also another incident where the man was walking towards the helicopter, the Marine One helicopter usually, yeah, okay, and he was walking towards the journalists, and they had their mics sticking out, like my hand is sticking out, and he got too close to him, yeah, and when he got too close, his hand, when he was trying to explain something, you know, he's trying to say something, his hand went through the mic. So where was his security at that point? All I'm just saying is that we have to be cognizant and we have to be astute and start paying attention to the things that they put in front of us, because a lot of the stuff that they pushing is fake. They want us to believe a narrative that ain't really true, halfway true, or it's got a lot of faults in it. So I think we have to start doing our due diligence, man. We have to start, you know, being astute about a lot of stuff. I mean, somebody who walks and this is supposed to be a live thing. And even if it wasn't live, how, I don't know what kind of physics that was, but how does your hand go through the mic? You know, I've never seen you in the Oval Office. Not once since you've been in office. With the, you know, the big blue carpet with the eagle on it. I never seen that. So just questions that make you go,
Something to think about there. Yeah. And look into. Yeah, absolutely. Keep my eyes open from that now.
yeah. I mean, I think you could probably check that out on YouTube. I think Dane Calloway, the guy that I talked about last time, I think he has a little video clip of it on his channel.
Okay.
So I'll just leave you guys with that, man. It's been pleasurable. Cool.
Absolutely. I'm gonna go ahead and close things out, and we can talk about the Hitler thing in another couple of weeks. But ladies and gentlemen, I got 4 favors to ask you. The first favor is to turn those damn TVs off. Turn them damn TVs off. Pick up some information, pick up some books. If you have to go to the library, go to the library. Go ahead, Tony.
No, that's number 1. That's the first favor.
Number 1. Cut the TVs off, please. Yeah. Go to the library, do some research. And here, listen, true growth comes from information or knowledge that challenges your beliefs.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that again. True growth comes with knowledge that challenges your beliefs. So turn the TVs off.
Oh, yeah. So you thought you could swim because you was in the 3 feet. Let me put you out here in the 20 feet and see how you do.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
Favor number 2. Favor number 2, folks, is like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Listen, if this information was not for you, it's okay. It's not for everybody. We ain't looking for everybody. We're only looking for those who get it. So please like, share, and subscribe. And here's what I like to relate this to. Have you ever guys ever got some food, cookies, or something that you didn't like, but you took it anyway because you know someone who will like it? Do the same thing with this video. Don't make it about yourself. Don't be selfish with it. If you know someone who is into this information that we share, just say, hey, man, this is something that I think you will be into. It's something I know you're into. Here, take a look at this video. Share it. Because guess what? If it doesn't save your life, it could save someone else's life. So that's number 2. Number 3. Here's what I want you to do for number 3. Here's my third favor. You guys see my information scrolling at the bottom. You see all my social media stuff. And now let me add that I am on TikTok. J Hunter Lee on TikTok as well. So find me on TikTok and let's connect there. I didn't put it down here yet, but by the time we do our next podcast, you'll see my TikTok ID down there. But you also see my Cash App, $ J Hunter Lee. What is that for? That is not for me. It is only for our podcast. Our podcast we got a camera, we got a light, I have a laptop here, and I have a tablet sitting right here. Just to let you guys know, here's my tablet. And we got us on the tablet too. So I'm able to see in all angles. What is the donation for the podcast? I get equipment. I might have a camera that may need to be replaced one day. Light might need to be replaced. Something might need to be replaced. And eventually they will. Why? Because technology gets better and your stuff get old. And as your stuff get old, it's the odds of slowing down. And I think they do that so that we could go buy more equipment. But that's another sermon for another Sunday. Also, if you look behind me, you see my backdrop here. You don't see that window behind me anymore. You see a backdrop. $80 of your donations have helped contribute to that. I paid like $300 for this backdrop. 80 of it was from your donations. So I thank you. Appreciate it. It's not for me. I don't need your money. I'm okay with money. I'm doing well, got business and stuff. I'm getting ready to get some cybersecurity contracts soon. So I'm not asking for your money for me. It's for the podcast. And all I ask for is $20 or less. $20 or less. That's all. I'm not asking for 40, 50, or 60. I'm not asking for any of that. Okay? Because if you send me that, I will return it and say, no, thank you. I didn't ask for that. I only asked for $20 or less. Isn't that fair? Right? So, my fourth favor. You ready for the fourth favor, folks? My fourth favor is to sing like no one can hear you. Dance like no one can see you. Love like you've never been hurt. And live like it's heaven on earth. I'm J Hunter Lee. This is William Ikemba Crowley and Tony LaGrant. We love you, and the world needs you, and it ain't nothing you can do about it. So stop that damn texting and driving. I want to say peace and blessings to each and every one of you. Have a great night. And don't forget to pick up that book, The Creatures from Jericho Island. Peace and blessings, folks. Have a great day.